Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Diablo 4 Necromancer in Season 5. Today I am covering Bone Spirit for the first time. I recently covered Minion Necromancer as a great endgame option for farming up all of the medium level endgame content. I plan to follow that up with a boss killing version, one that's going to do great in the endgame in general for our current purposes, but everyone in the comments was talking about Bone Spirit. The reason that we didn't cover Bone Spirit initially is because it has ridiculous requirements. 100% crit chance. The Overpower version, which is the one you should generally run, requires 275 maximum resource minimum before you can press Bone Spirit, which is a hilarious demand. As well as, you know, tons of Overpower stat and crit damage stat. The minimum requirements are well beyond someone that's just hit level 100 or is at the end of their leveling journey. But obviously, everyone wants Bone Spirit now because we know it's speculated to be the strongest build for Necromancer in Season 5. So how can you run it as soon as possible? What are the minimum requirements? This build is just going to give it to you with a setup here that has 100% crit chance, maximizes crit damage, and to make it happen as soon as possible, does not run Overpower at all. It's important to know that the Overpower build is the proper best one that's going to perform better. But you know, the Overpower build is going to be a lot harder to run, or at least a lot harder to get access to and get functional in the opening week. And so by comparison, this is going to work immediately and is much more attainable, meaning you can actually get this running a lot sooner. So as you can see, it's doing fine in your Infernal Hordes at tier 5 and 6. I'm very happy. We want to be farming at least tiers 61 and above, so you can maximize the materials you're getting to actually start masterworking. Here, I'm doing a tier 75 very comfortably and could easily go higher. So obviously, it works right now, but it still has some requirements before it's even going to function. But I've done my best to get this working as quickly and as efficiently as possible with minimum requirements to get it to function. So let's talk about the main thing you need to have to make this work before you can even consider it. You must have 100% crit strike chance. Even though it says I've got 50.5 right now, this doesn't take into account, for example, bone critical strike chance. So I'm actually getting 5.2% there. Here's another 4% on bone crit strike chance in the Paragon. Here's another 12% that's not active right now from the skill tree. So that's 21% added that's not being counted right now, getting me over 70% easily. Then you consider Grasping Veins, which is giving me a consistent extra 20%. That's 90%. I'm getting more from the Serration passive in the skill tree. I'm getting a huge chunk here, another 20% at Bone Storm, so I'm over 100% when that's active. And as a fail-safe for many of us who are gearing up right now, the Swelling Curse can be up to 25% for your Bone Spirit's critical strike chance, just flat out. So it is actually much more attainable, achievable than you might think to reach 100% crit chance on your Bone Spirit, because I'm standing here right now with the potential of like 140% or something. So just know going into this, you must have 100% crit strike chance before this can even work. This build will provide that. What's it like to actually play this though? Well, you just need to make your Bone Spirit smash. So you want max resource on your essence before you cast it. The more you have, the harder it's going to hit. Combining that with Bone Prison is great, because each time you press Bone Prison on a target, it's 25 essence back and an extra 5 per enemy trapped. So quite a lot for a pack of enemies. And very importantly, the individual walls around the Bone Prison actually count as a minion, which goes towards the Requiem aspect, increasing our maximum essence. When it's active, it should be pretty much active every fight all the time. So it's a lot of increased essence. It essentially has almost no cooldown in this build, so we're spamming it. Obviously, we Corpse Tendril on cooldown to maintain the crit chance and obviously crit damage on the targets, applying Decrepify to everything, and we're also using skeletons. That is because of the new Requiem aspect that's being in the build. Essentially, it just means while we've got skeletons running around, we have more max essence, and it gives us a button to regularly pop corpses to consume them for Corpse Eater in the Paragon. Lastly, you just Bone Storm defensively or offensively, pretty much on cooldown, put it all together and smash targets with Bone Spirit over and over while they're in the wall. We have a new unique that's going to be great for exactly that. There's the Imprisoned Spirit aspect that's also going to be relevant for Bone Spirit and Bone Prison. And hey, Bone Storm is providing a massive barrier for us in terms of survivability. So with all that explained, let's cover the build and what you need to do to follow along to make this work. We'll kick this one off with the Book of the Dead. Start with the Warriors. There's two choices you have here. You're going to be running Reapers on upgrade 2 so that they can actually form corpses. This is specifically for single target where it's the most valuable, so that you've always got Corpse Tendrils and you can maintain your Corpse Eater Paragon node. Having those corpses is a really helpful thing. However, with them being Reapers and they're only minions you have, they will die relatively often, but you're spamming Raised Skeleton anyway, so it doesn't really matter. However, if it is a problem that they're dying a ton, you can go for Defenders instead with upgrade 2 for the massive DR they get. But for single target, you're going to want Reapers on upgrade 2. Next, we have the Skeleton Mages. There's two options here that are very relevant for us. Sacrificing Shadow gives us massive essence regen, which is really important, but also 20 more max essence. This can be compared or argued against the Requiem aspect, which is giving you more max essence per active minion. So we're actually losing out on potential max essence by running this, but the essence regen is so important, especially when we're under geared. The other option we care about is the Overpower damage, but since we're not running Overpower in this build to get it working as fast as possible, the Shadow sacrifice is the obvious choice. Lastly, Golems, obviously it's the Iron Sacrifice, way more crit strike damage. That's what this is all about. That moves us on to the skill tree, where we have 2 points into Bone Splinters. The reason for that is because you need to spend 2 points to get to the next tree, and we're not actually using a basic attack. However, Bone Splinters is very relevant for this build. The new unique Path of Tragul causes your Bone Spirit to spread these Bone Splinters out to the enemies trapped within. This increases your max essence by 2 for 10 seconds each time they hit an enemy. So why not make them hit harder instead of a literal wasted point spent on enhanced Bone Splinters? Really minor stuff, but yeah, there you go. On the next tree then, we max out Hued Flesh, we want corpses. We max out Unliving Energy, we need more max essence to do more damage. And we've got Imperfectly Balanced maxed out to make it so our core skills, Bone Spirit, deal more damage. On the next tree then, we were going for Bone Prison, which is super important, enhancing it and going for Ghastly. The enhancement means that they're 8 seconds of vulnerable while inside the Bone Prison, so everything in there is going to be vulnerable, no doubt. Ghastly, though, is the thing that's giving the 25 essence on use on a target and then an extra 5 per enemy trapped. This is absolutely required. So we max that out. Next, we take 1 point Grim Harvest just so we can get to Fueled by Death to max that out. We max out Death's Embrace for the damage reduction and the close damage increase. Of course, we're Decrepify 1 point, going to Abhorrent for the CDR. Cursing everything with that, we want amplified damage. Right, down on the next tree, we of course take Corpse Tendrils to Plagued. It will generate Vulnerable, which is nice, but mainly Bone Prison's going to do that. We just want to spam it for the crit chance and the crit damage. We max out Necrotic for the Fortify. We max out, obviously, Bone Spirit, enhancing it. This means if it crits, you get 7 seconds off the cooldown. That's why it needs to crit. Finally, Dreadful gives you a load of essence to regen over 4 seconds after you press it. So then we have our passives. I've got 2 points Incineration here because I had a spare point left over. Each point is an extra 0.3% to crit strike chance for each 30 essence you have as you cast your Bone skill. So right now this should equate to about 8% for me, which is absolutely massive if you're low on crit chance. Then for the rest, we max it out from Compound Fracture, Evulsion, and Rapid Ossification, helping CDR and just hit harder. Then for the ultimate tree, we take Bone Storm, obviously, Prime and Supreme for crit strike chance, DR, and even a shield with the aspect we're running, Shielding Storm. Inspiring Lead is great. While you're healthy, you get 12% increased crit strike chance. This is huge. And the last point, of course, Ossified Essence. The more essence we have as we cast, the more damage we deal, which is what this build is all about. And now for the big one, the Paragon. So I'm going to try to be as quick as I can on this. This is maximizing crit damage and all the good stuff outside of Overpower since we're not using that. So on the first board, of course, we're taking Amplify. It's going to make our curse skills increase our damage by 10% times. And also what's nice about that is it enhances magic nodes nearby. So magic nodes of raw damage are doubled up. So we absolutely want those. Here's how I spend my points to achieve this around that. And since I'm super maxed out on armor, I don't need preservation. So our first board expansion, of course, is Bone Graft. Hitting enemies with bone skills increases your damage, scaling, as well as your max essence. So our bone splinters that are triggering on our targets in Bone Prison is actually scaling our max essence as well as our damage. Anyway, the glyph that we have here is of course Corporeal, 10% times increased physical damage, which is all of our bone stuff, and then Corporeal enhances magic nodes within range. So extra resistance to elements and extra bone damage is really good. Here's how I spend my points on the board though to achieve that, coming up and around to Reinvigorate and all the nodes around it for max essence and essence on kill. We also come around to Calcify to get everything around that for bone damage and crit strike damage, coming through Entomb for the bone critical strike chance, and picking up the node at the top. Also on the way out as we come to the top left, we do come up to Tenacity. Again, we don't care about the armor, but the max life is really nice. On to our next board then, the third board. This is Flesh Eater, where we have Gravekeeper. Gravekeeper's massively increasing your damage for every close corpse, so we want close corpses around all the time. That's why we're using the Reapers on upgrade 2. It also enhances rare nodes within range, which is nice, so we get more resistance to all elements, but more importantly, damage to elites and intelligence. So that's how I spend my points on this board. Pretty quick here coming through to the legendary node, and on the way out we pick up Stifle and the nodes around it for more crit strike damage. Then we extend onto the next board, which is Scent of Death. This is major DR, which is pretty much always going to be what it is, keeping us alive. 5. And the glyph on this board is Essence. Way more crit strike damage, of course, as well as critical strike damage to enemies that are not healthy. As we come through, I do come around to Corrective, more crit strike damage there, and even more nodes that do more of that. We come through the board like so, to activate the glyph and get as much dexterity around it as we can, and work our way down to the legendary node. Down here, I also come up and to the left to pick up Deathbringer, more damage to injured enemies. Ruin, so that's going to increase our ultimate damage, which is Bone Storm. Really not that relevant, but crit strike damage is, so we're picking those up. And with spare points I have at the very end of doing my boards, I came around here to pick up Shadow Resilience, not for the Shadow Resistance, but max life, and max life. Cool. Now we come down to the final board, which is just a dump board. In this case, it is Cult Leader, because we're going to put Dead Razor here, which is going to help our survivability of our minions, make them deal a bit more damage. It's not that relevant. Mainly the Dead Razor secondary effect is when your minions deal damage to an enemy, it takes increased damage. So against single target, it's actually going to get us to that 15% times increase, which is very big, really helping the single target DPS. Plus, that'll also enhance things like damage reduction for your minions and their damage, but again, not that important. But I just get that active at 40 intelligence, effectively like so. And that is the Paragon board, all about crit strike damage, essentially, and the perks of everything we could find. Next up, it's time to talk gear, and with that, I do have a mythic unique that I do choose to run, which is Harlequin Crest or Shekos, 20% DR, plus 4 ranks to all skills like, Bone Spirit, as well as it coming with max resource, is insane. So if you happen to have that, you should run it, but the obvious alternative to that is a cult, which is going to increase the number of skeletal warriors and mages you have. In the case of warriors, it's just going to mean we get more out of Requiem, which is our main really important aspect. When on your amulet, it's up to 10.5 increased max essence per active minion. So that's at least over 40 there, or up to 60 with a cult. And don't forget, Bone Prison, the walls, the individual walls, they count as minions, which is going to skyrocket your max essence because of the Requiem aspect. So it's a pretty big deal. The more essence that you have, the more damage you deal with your Bone Spirit. But ideally, obviously, if you had a mythic unique, Harlequin Crest is the one. On the chest piece, we have Hardened Bones. That could be on your legs. It doesn't really matter. It's just the best damage reduction we have. On the gloves, it's Serration, but this is just an offensive aspect. Put it where you want on any offensive slot. On the legs, we have Shielding Storm, which is a massive shield while we're going with our Bone Storm. Great damage reduction. The boots, of course, the new unique Path of Tragul. Bone Prison traps in a larger area. Awesome. And fires up to 30 bone splinters at enemies trapped within. This increases our max essence per enemy that we hit with that, so it massively scales our max essence when you press Bone Prison. This is required. I don't have a great roll here. I'm working on it. We use a one-hand weapon and an offhand focus. And with this crit focus build with no overpower, you want a sword because it has critical strike damage as part of its inherent stat. In terms of aspect, of course, Grasping Veins on a max roll, it's going to give us a 20% crit strike chance whenever we press the corpse tendrils, which we're doing always. And then also massively increasing the damage to those pulled by it via crit damage. For the offhand then, you want a focus. As you can see, I'm running Swelling Curse for up to 25% increased critical strike chance on my Bone Spirit. I'm at the point where I have enough crit strike chance that I'm going to swap this out in, version 2 of this build that does use Overpower. But if you're lacking on crit strike chance, this is the easiest way to get it. As I've shown, the amulet is very important. It's Requiem. I have a mid roll, which sucks. A top roll on this is vital, especially when we get into the Overpower version. But since we don't need 275 essence to get this version of the build working, because it's not the Overpower version, we can get away with it. But Requiem as an aspect is so important that we have it on the amulet. Then for the rings, we have the Torment aspect, of course, helping our essence regen when we use bone skills and crit. And lastly, Imprisoned Spirit's Ring. This is the one that's actually causing Bone Spirit to explode inside a bone prison twice, dealing less damage than the full version, but not by much. So it's a massive damage increase, that's for sure. Now then, that brings us to affixes. You want to make sure that you're at the armor minimum cap of 9235, which I'm under right now when I'm wearing this set, just to show you what I would be running if I wasn't using my mythic unique Harlequin Crest, which puts me over the cap. So essentially, you just need to make sure that you're over the cap, which very likely means in my case, I need armor on one of the affixes here, and you can also temper for it. So there's the minimum you require, but in terms of affixes on the gear, let's look. On the helmet, you need maximum resource, obviously, then intel and max life as secondary, unless you need armor. On the chest piece, again, same thing, intel max life, unless you need armor, but very importantly on the chest piece, you need Macabre skill levels. That's going to enhance the damage of Bone Spirit. On the gloves, we've got intel, crit strike chance required, and then levels to core skills, again, more levels to bone spirit, making it hit harder. On the legs, we've got intel, max life, and then basic skills. That gives us extra levels to bone splinters. Like I said, our new unique is dealing bone splinter damage, so it's going to slightly enhance its damage, which is nice, but not required per se, but nice to have. Again, this is another slot where you could have the armor affix if you're needing to reach the cap. Then for the boots, obviously uniques we can't change. On the one hand sword, we have intel max life and crit strike damage. On the focus, we have intel max resource, again must be here, and again crit strike chance must be here. For the amulet then, you want ranks to evulsion, your most important damage passive, crit strike chance required, and then a third one which could be CDR as a good option. Here I just have a chance to make enemies vulnerable. It's not the best for me, but hopefully I'll get the right thing soon. For rings then, it's crit strike chance and damage as a required, and then a third option that could be intel max life, raw damage like I have there, or even attack speed. It means better essence gen, better speed for the bone spirit. It is nice to have a bit of attack speed, but also not a focus. So max life or intel, perfectly fine, but you need crit strike chance and damage as the other two. So that's affixes. Let's now talk about tempering. On your tempering slots that can be used on the left side, you're looking for max life and profane invocation as your tempering. That could mean curse size, it could mean corpse tendril size to increase the pull-in radius, and it could mean curse duration as well. At a minimum, you want 2 corpse tendril size increases so that you're as close to 100% as you can get, because that pull-in is very important. Otherwise, max life or armor if you need it on the defensive pieces of helm, chest, and legs. For gloves, it is going to be bone spirit damage every time. For our weapon, we go bone spirit damage, although I got bone damage unluckily, and bone spirit explosion size. That is important. You want at least 2 of those, again, to get as close to 100%, because it's a small explosion. We need to make it bigger. So on the offhand of the focus, again, bone spirit damage would be ideal here, and then bone spirit explosion size. Next, for the amulet, I happen to have bone critical strike chance. That's a great option if you're low on the crit strike chance. But what we're really looking for on the jewelry is this: bone spirit damage on everything, and casting macabre skills restore primary resource. Basically, it means as you cast your bone spirit, you just get a chunk of resource back. The more we have of that, the faster we get to max resource again and compress the bone spirit the next time. So bone spirit damage and casting macabre skills restore, that's what we're looking for on jewelry. In terms of masterworking targets, you need to make sure that you've got 100% crit strike chance. So if you're below that or you're not sure, masterworking will increase the stats of everything passively. So start with the things that have crit strike chance on it to get more crit strike chance. Your priorities under that then will be increased core skill levels, bone spirit damage, essence restore, the main passive of evulsion, and maximum resource. That's what you need. The more max resource you have, the harder you're going to hit, and the sooner that you'll have over 275 as a minimum, so you can transition into the Overpower version, which is what I'll be following up with my next build as soon as possible. Lastly, for gems then, it's what you'd expect: rubies in the armor for health, emeralds in the weapons for crit strike damage, and lastly, diamonds in everything for your jewelry to make sure that you're at the 70% cap for all resistances. But there you have it. That is our crit damage focused version of the Bone Spirit build. As I've highlighted, I think there's going to be 3 versions of this build. People who are desperate and want it now, so you do the crit damage version I've just outlined. The true version, which is Overpower, requiring quite a lot of setup and 275 resource essence as a minimum, on top of everything else like 100% crit strike chance. And then the final version, which is going to be, perfect gear and mythic uniques. I will be following up on builds on all of these things to help you follow that journey as best I can. I hope this was what you were looking for to get you bone spiriting as soon as possible. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and I'll see you in the updated video as soon as I'm in my Overpower build.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.